Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Side Hustle Ideas. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Labor Day that we have today. So, I'm assuming that you're all not here. You're all going out and doing whatever it is people do on Labor Day. They do manual labor, or they go party, or that kind of thing. But for those of you who are here, welcome. This is the weekly live stream that I do once a week on entrepreneurship and side hustles. And if you have an ambition to have your own business one day, work for yourself, or you're sort of looking for something on a bit of a smaller scale, why can't I talk today? You're wanting to do a side hustle, something on a smaller scale. A side hustle, obviously, for those who don't know, is a business venture that you do on the side while you have a day job, while you hold down a day job. If you have ambitions to do this, to learn about business and to add another income stream, you've come to the right place, because that's what we're here to talk about today. The title of this episode of Side Hustle Ideas, episode 103, by the way, is How Successful Entrepreneurs Think Differently. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And as always, this is an interactive live stream. So really what this is a way for you guys to ask me questions. Anything to do with entrepreneurship, business, careers, that kind of stuff, startups, that whole world. I have spent many years advising startup founders and small business. That's what I do. And so this is kind of an attempt to do more of that online. So welcome. There are 8 people here. And as always, a live challenge I would like to extend to everyone is, because this is called Side Hustle Ideas, if you get in the chat, share with us what you think would be a good side hustle idea for someone to have to start up on the side. Let us know. And if this is your first time here, if you have been a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you should be able to see the chat box somewhere in the vicinity of my face. You should be able to get in there and post stuff, ask questions, that sort of thing, and I will do my best to help you out. That's the whole point. So Alpine's pal is here, says, good morning, happy Labor Day. Yes, and same to you. Also, Arhuna says, hello to Arhuna. I'm sorry if I bastardize your name, mispronounce your name. It's unintentional. No disrespect intended. I have a long and wonderfully glorious history of mispronouncing people's names, especially in awkward social situations that lead to a lot of embarrassment and things like this. So why stop now? That's my motto. So if that's you, I apologize. Alpine's pal says, I've tried doing surveys as a side hustle. That was a pain and maybe dangerous online exposure. Now, when you say doing surveys, what do you mean precisely? Like, you mean you complete surveys, or you go and get people to take surveys on behalf of a company or something like that? Surveys are interesting because, in my experience, they're not great. What you usually get with surveys is totally polarized results. You know how, with most things in life, you have kind of an expected outcome, and then you have sort of like a bell curve, like a probability distribution, right? That sort of, most people are kind of right around where you'd expect it to be, but then there's a few outliers, right? Almost like shooting at a target or something. If you're throwing darts or whatever, and you plot out how far away from the bullseye you hit, it comes out in a nice bell distribution, right? That's how most processes in nature turn out. However, with surveys, when you do a survey or you do poll results of people that fill in a survey, what you get is the opposite. You don't get most people in the middle. You get like this. Usually people complete surveys because they're either delighted and they want to say something really good, or they're outraged. They had a terrible experience and they're mad and they want to unleash. You don't usually get a lot of people in the middle that are kind of like, meh, that complete surveys. because what's the motivation, right? If you go to a restaurant or something and they say, please complete a survey, who completes those voluntarily? It's usually people that are either delighted or outraged. It's not the majority of people somewhere in the middle. They thought the food was meh. You don't usually get a lot of those, right? So that's the deal. I'm just going to turn down my camera brightness. It's going to be one of those days where I have to ride my camera brightness the entire time. So that's going to be fun. That's the level of technology I have at my disposal. Alpine's Pal says online surveys that pay you cheap points. Okay. At least half of them are, sorry you didn't qualify for this survey. So it's all worthwhile then. It's one of those things that make you feel like your life is really going somewhere, right? That's a good feeling. Yeah, I've been there. I'm sure a lot of people have. Like, I remember when in my 20s, you're like, what the hell am I doing here? It's like, I'm not a Star Wars fan, and I don't talk about movies, but there was a line from one of those Star Wars movies. It might have been the original Star Wars, where was it Luke Skywalker? He says, like, someone asks him, where are you, or where are you from? And he says, I'm from like the brightest place in the galaxy. I'm the place it's the furthest from, right? Meaning just the back of beyond, absolute nowhere. So that's fun. We've all had experiences like that, jobs and things like that when we were young, that make you feel like that. It's a life experience. So Alpine's Pal, as I recall, you are on the younger side, and that means you're getting that experience early. So that's good. If it stimulates you to want to accomplish more and want to do something more meaningful, then it's a good experience, right? So that's what we're here to talk about today. Okay, so let's talk about the title of here, like this: how successful entrepreneurs think differently. We're talking about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the idea. It's an area of business, okay, and it deals with being able to seize opportunities and exploit them financially. Okay, so if you see a need, right, you think like, okay, there's a demand for this thing that's not being met. Doesn't seem like it's really being met. Now, if I were to come along and try and meet that demand, give the people what they want, could I make a profit doing that? And if the answer is yes, then it looks like a win-win, right? I create a thing that people want. They're happy to have it available. They pay for it. I make money. They get their thing. Everyone's happy. That's the idea, right? That's what entrepreneurship is. So entrepreneurs look at the world and they look for opportunities like this. As my camera brightness needs to be adjusted again. Right? That's the basic idea. And I think it's a really cool area. To me, it always feels like business in its purest form. Because when you're working a menial job in a large corporation, or even if you're like towards the top in a large corporation, a multinational corporation, it's very easy to be sheltered from the reality of how that business works. It's very easy to get an extremely skewed view of what this entity actually does, why people come back to it and pay it money to produce something, right? Most people don't see that. You might see a tiny cog in the machine, a tiny little piece. Maybe you work in customer service or quality or sales or, some kind, one of the sort of services like HR, IT, the accounting function, something like that. You're a small cog in a big machine. You don't really see where the value derives from where the value derives in that large entity, right? So a lot of people, they think they understand, but they actually don't. And this has been very entertaining to observe out in the world when you look at what a lot of prominent big corporations are doing and how they stumble because they just don't understand the fundamentals of what they're doing. They don't understand where the value, is created in their business. And you could see that when executives sort of like, get a chance to put their plan into motion. And sometimes these plans turn out to be hilariously and disastrously wrong because they don't understand the business that they're in or the company that they're in. There are countless examples of that, Hollywood, right? Many, many examples in many different industries. So a cool thing about entrepreneurship is that you understand the fundamentals, right? That gives you a lot of power and a lot of potential. You look out and you see in the world like, okay, here's an opportunity, right? Everybody wants this, everybody needs this, but it's not being met or it's not being met properly, right? Now, if you happen to know how to deliver on that, there's a real opportunity for you to make money, right? So that's what entrepreneurs, that's the kind of thinking that they're tuned into. And then that's paired with skills where they go and they examine this opportunity. They see like, okay, let's evaluate this and really see if this is something that I could do. Are there any constraints? How big of demand is there? Can we validate some of this demand? Are there any roadblocks to being able to come in and just serve this demand and then make money? Alpine's Pal says, some people have their own homeowner services business like tree cutting, landscaping, etc., and it becomes their main hustle. But it's exhausting, especially if you become dependent on that income. I've worked for some of those. I've had 2 to 3 dreams/nightmares that I'm not allowed to take fallen change on the floor. There goes that side hustle. Yeah, okay, that's an interesting place to start here. Okay, the whole homeowner services thing. Because although that's a very low scale business, right? You're working in the consumer space. It's a B2C business, which means that it's business to consumer as opposed to business. This simply means that the people who pay you, your customers, they are individuals as opposed to businesses, right? Okay, so you're talking about tree cutting, landscaping, etc., right? Yeah, so if you have a bunch of homeowners, they all own houses or whatever, and you're providing a service that someone with a house might need, like you're mowing the lawn or you're doing the landscaping, things like this. A lot of construction-related stuff, borders that too, right? Like if you were a contractor, you provide roofing services, right? You fix roofs, stuff like that. Same idea, right? You're looking for people that have a need for something. Now, the interesting thing about this business, right, homeowner business, is that it's highly localized, right? So, there might be like a lot of roofers out there in the world. There might be a lot of people that can cut grass, whatever, landscape. But the real question is, are there any of these people that are good in a certain geographic region? It's highly dependent on your geographic region. It's not really that convenient if there's a roofer that you could hire, but that roofer is 250 miles away, right? You want someone that can come over quickly, especially for things like cutting your lawn and stuff. It really depends on geographic proximity. That's the name of the game for those types of businesses, right? So, the idea is like, okay, there might be people out there that can cut grass and do landscaping and do roofing, whatever, but are there any in this region, right? This little area where it's convenient? What about people that can fix your furnace? Where I live in Canada, we get cold winters, right? And everybody has a furnace in their house to heat their house. And if your furnace malfunctions or breaks down in the winter, that's a big deal. Within 12 hours, your house is really cold. Water freezes in your house. all your pipes might, your water pipes in the walls might burst or whatever. If you have pets and stuff, they may die. Like it's a big deal, right? So having someone who can come and fix your furnace and having them close by is very important. Maybe they are close by, but they're not visible. You don't know that they're there. That's the same thing as them not being there. Right? Or maybe they're there, they're close by, and they can do this, but you don't trust them. Right? They have some negative goodwill, which is the business term for people being jackasses, and you don't like them. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that's a problem, right? So as an entrepreneur, if, on the small end of things, if you notice this kind of thing, you go, hey, that's something I can do. Right? So entrepreneurs are thinking, they're sort of like looking for these types of opportunities. Instead of just wandering around minding your own business and just happening to observe this, you actually do a systematic investigation and say like, okay, let's map out where all the homes are in this region. Let's map out where all the suppliers of this service are. And let's see if there's any dead spots. Let's see if there's any things that geographically might look like, hey, there's nobody here. There's nobody within 50 kilometers of these people here. Or you start with your own neighborhood. So Alpine's pal mentioned like, you're doing this or you're hearing about it when you're very young, right? You could be a teenager. You could be, a young adult, this kind of thing. And some of the more business savvy young adults are kind of tuned into this sort of stuff. It's not super skilled. Almost anybody can cut grass or whatever and do a lot of construction stuff that's less skilled. But is there anyone providing that service in this region? So that's an example, anyway, of this kind of thing. Myron says, love the material. Well, thank you, Myron. That's very nice of you to say. And if you have any ideas or suggestions or questions, feel free to share them with us. As always, I just want to reiterate, if you have, like this live stream is called Side Hustle Ideas. This is episode 103 of Side Hustle Ideas. So if you have an idea for a side hustle and you think it's good, put it in the chat and let everyone know. And we could even talk about it if that's something you're looking for. Incidentally, as always, a shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members. Membership has the privileges, and also my Patreons, my super thanks donors. Those are always nice to get. And my viewers and participants, thank you so much for being here. Let me know if you have questions, and I will be happy to respond to that and steer the discussion in that direction. Alpine's pal says, you make a great point that it's a more local thing. It's hard to make more money beyond the local area. Well, you can. I wouldn't say it's hard. It's just that you require different skills and it's a different process, right? So the thing about doing it locally is that it's great for unskilled people, maybe young people, maybe teenagers. They want to get into this kind of thing, right? Like it's not unheard of that, some kids or whatever will knock on the doors in their neighborhood and say, hey, do you need someone to mow your lawn? Instead of you worrying about it, let us do it. You pay us a couple of bucks and we'll take care of it, right? Maybe even we'll do a free trial, right? If you have any doubts, free trial, get it done for free the first time, and then see if you want more of that for very cheap, right? Like some of the more, it's great to see more business-minded young people that are kind of tuning into this, right? And it's an opportunity. And there's many types of businesses you could do. There's a lot of unskilled things, but where I was going with the whole geographic proximity thing is that it dispels the myth that you have to be way smarter than anyone else. It dispels the myth that you have to have some really high level, highly sought after skills. You don't, right? But you do have to recognize the opportunity. So for example, in the construction business, if you're selling like lawn mowing services or whatever, it's not rocket science. Anybody can push a lawnmower or whatever. So a lot of young people, do this, right? It's more of a doing work rather than thinking work, right? So it's more labor intensive, like Alpi Pal said. You mentioned that somewhere along the way. It's exhausting. It's like a labor thing. You decide how you do it, right? But the point is, it's an opportunity because the number one thing was the geographic region thing. There's a lot of people out there that can cut grass, but if there aren't any offering that service right here to these people, right, getting in their face and saying, hey, we could, have you thought about this? I know you could use it. Have you considered doing this? Right? Nobody's doing that. So that would be a potential business opportunity, right? So, this is very small scale, very simplistic, but it illustrates the point, right? So what do you need to be successful at that? You need to be tuned in to what's going on around you. So you can't just sort of like live in a bubble. You have to sort of go out in the world and observe, like, okay, I see lots of people with big lawns. And also a lot of these people seem to be old, maybe they don't enjoy going out and cutting their grass like a thing. Maybe some do, but maybe some don't. Let's find out, right? Let's go and get that data. Let's go and knock on doors. Let's go and, see if there's, a Facebook group online on Facebook for this community or something, or this like collection of houses, like a residential area or something. Maybe they all talk to each other about what's going on in the neighborhood. Maybe you could get on there and instead of knocking on 200 doors, maybe you do one post, So, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to sort of look around. You have to be extroverted in that sense. You have to go out and observe and see what's happening, right? And then be able to probe, like the world, right? Essentially, let's like ask people. Let's see if we can get information, right? And then you need to be able to sort of put things out there. If you're offering your services, you then have to be able to communicate that, to these people, right? So these are the fundamentals of marketing. And I've spoken about that, I think, last week and possibly even the previous week too, right? That's, if you want to get more high level where you'd actually study this stuff, this is the subject of marketing. Marketing is the scientific study of groups of customers and potential customers, right? It's basically the solution to the question, how do I make something popular? Right? How do I make something popular? I want to go into business. I want to offer services for cutting people's lawns. How do I make that popular? Everybody wants my services. Well, it helps if you're selling the right thing to the right person, right? So that there is a need for that. Who has a need for it, right? So you've identified your target audience, like your target market, and then you're communicating the right thing to them, right? You're advertising the things that what they care about. Do they care about price, or do they care about the quality of, like, you can cut grass better than anyone else or something, or do they care about other things? Maybe they want to feel like they're supporting kids in the neighborhood. That's important to them. So you would lead with that angle, knowing this. Right? So it requires like information coming in and then information going out. And you basically answer those three fundamental questions. Who are my audience? What message should I send them that will convince them to do business with me? And what channel to go over? How do I reach them? Those are the three fundamental questions that they study in the subject of marketing. And that's also coincidentally what entrepreneurs are highly tuned into also, right? Okay, where did I leave off here? Okay, Alpine's Pal says, you make a great point. It's more a local thing. It's hard to make more money beyond the local area. Well, yeah, like I responded to that. It's not necessarily hard. It's just that it's a different skill set, right? I feel like the best entrepreneurs have the thinking that they can't do everything manually. Time is money is kind of cliche, but I guess it's more about how much mental effort you put in. Well, that's an excellent example of one of the first business decisions you're going to have to make, right? Do I do everything myself, or do I start to delegate some of it to a partner or an employee or anyone else, right? Now, the general rule, very generally here, is that usually in entrepreneurship, you're doing as much as you possibly can, right? And you're certainly trying to keep all the higher level, all the thinking stuff, all the decision making. That's going to be all you. You're not going to like delegate out your thinking to someone else. That's usually not the way it works. And even when you can do it, it's usually a bad idea, right? So that's the first thing. Now, there's a lot of advantages to being lean and mean. If you don't need to pay for it, don't pay for it. If you can do it yourself, do it yourself. That's a good general rule to start out with, up to the point where you're completely swamped, right? And then it becomes a matter of like, you see, here's another thing. Instead of trying to figure out ways of paying for something or figure out ways of getting it done, either with other people or something, instead put your thinking into how can I eliminate the need for doing this, rather than figuring out how I can get it done, right? That's usually a great way to approach this kind of thing, or a lot of things in business, right? Sometimes with a bit of thinking, we can realize that, we don't actually need to do that if we go about things a slightly different way. It eliminates the need for that, and then we reduce the things we have to do while achieving the same results, right? But I've worked with people that try the opposite. The opposite fails. Like some people will kind of go into entrepreneurship thinking like, okay, I am, I'm very important, and I want to be a very high level person. So I am going to hire people to do every little thing that needs to be done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to coordinate them, and I'm going to deal with the money, essentially. I'm going to like obtain financing from somewhere, and then I'm going to channel that to pay for all these people, and I'm going to coordinate it. Usually that fails miserably, right? Sounds good on paper. There's major problems with that when you try and actually implement it in the world. The biggest thing being that all the people you have working for you, they really don't care about your business. They're there simply to be paid. Beyond that, they don't give a rat's ass about what you're trying to do, or, they will not go above and beyond, generally speaking. They're employees, right? It's a very simple exchange. You pay them money, they give you their time. It's simple and it's fair. But in this context, that may not be the way you would want to do the fundamentals. You know what I'm saying? When you're starting it off, especially when you have very limited funds to support all this right in the beginning. Okay, we're with Mr. Is it M. Marriott? So Mr. Marriott, Monsieur Marriott. A boss once told me that it's a dog-eat-dog world, and with that being said, beware saying your excellent ideas out loud. That's wrong. That's false. Your boss was an idiot. Listen, it may be true locally. Maybe for some people in their little world, it might be a dog-eat-dog world. There can be very stiff competition. That's, fair enough. But when we're talking about larger things like entrepreneurship, it's absolutely not. It's a world of opportunity, right? Like, think of it this way. You have a big pile of dirt in the backyard or the back area of your home, behind your home, right? Now, if you put time into it, you could grow a garden, you could grow vegetables, you could grow flowers, like things of value. You could sell the flowers to people, you could eat the vegetables, whatever. But it involves putting some time into it, right? It also involves knowing what to do. Like, if you don't know how to grow or like take care of plants so they grow, and it doesn't matter how much work you put into it, you're doing the wrong things, right? So in a sense, especially in the world of entrepreneurship, the world is kind of like that, right? It's like a big sort of pile of dirt. There's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of people buying and selling. There's a lot of people out there that are dissatisfied with the options available to them. You know, they're using tools that aren't very good. They're buying things from the store that are solutions to problems they have, but those solutions aren't very good. You know, you go to the store and you buy, like, I don't know, a chemical that you pour down your sink that unblocks your sink because your sink has been plugged with goo and hair or whatever, right? You got a problem. So, like, what are the tools? What are the products that people are selling that are a solution to this problem? Well, some people sell tools that, you know, it's like a mechanical tool. You stick it down the drain, you pull out the crap, right? Another company sells like a chemical. You pour it down your sink. Supposedly, it dissolves all the goo and clears the problem. So you try these solutions and you realize they're not very good, you know? You spent money on this big sort of bottle of chemicals. You poured it down the sink. It did absolutely nothing, right? You know, so it's like, it's a piece of crap. You just got ripped off. You're not happy with that, right? Somebody else sells you a tool, you know, to do it mechanically. It's messy. It's hard work. You're not happy with that either, right? How many things in your life are you not happy with? Things are too expensive. Things don't perform very well. They're not reliable. There's probably a lot of those, right? Every single one of those is an entrepreneurial opportunity, in theory. Right? You could come along, and if you have the solution, or you could find the solution relatively easily, right? You have something to offer people. A lot of times, there are solutions. It's just that the people struggling with them aren't aware that those solutions exist. How many times have you seen that? Right? That's an entrepreneurial opportunity. So, you know, it's a dog-eat-dog world, yes, you know, in the sense that, you know, you're both fighting over the same thing when companies are in competition with each other. But there's also this dimension where, with a little bit of creative thinking and entrepreneurial thinking, you can create new opportunities, right? You're not necessarily fighting with somebody over like a pie. You know, you each want a larger piece, but for you to have more, it means they have to have less, right? It's like a zero-sum game. It's a finite size. This is the idea that you could create a whole new pie, and then that could be yours. Your competitor is not even thinking of that pie, not competing for it, right? So if you find that it exists, it's yours, right? That's the way I think of it, and the way a lot of people think of it, and the way a lot of people succeed, you know? Alpine's Pal says, and then, like, how much is that mental effort worth? And can I speak for myself that I get discouraged that it's rent free? This is time is money. It's kind of cliche. Well, you know, you're doing what's normal when you're stepping into this world. Okay, like these questions and this way of thinking, it's perfectly normal. You're trying to rationalize like how this stuff works. You know, and that's good. But the thing is, you shouldn't be discouraged. It's a very optimistic, very forward-looking kind of thing if you do it right. Okay, I mean, yes, you know, there's a lot of opportunities. Some of them are easier to exploit than others. Some of them you have the solution for without even having to develop anything. Right? You know the fix, right? You're just selling the fix. For example, a very common type of startup is for people in connected to the construction industry, right? Doing what they call skill trades. Now, some of those trades are highly skilled. Others kind of really aren't, right? You know, it really blurs the line between skilled trades and manual labor, you know what I'm saying? Depending on what we're talking about. And in that case, you don't have to struggle with the solution. You have the solution. If you're a furnace repair person, you can just start up a company selling furnace repair services. You know what I mean? It's not hard developing the solution. That's not really the challenge. The challenge in that case will most likely be selling it, connecting with, you know, the people that need you, your potential market, and then convincing them to hire you, and then, knowing how to reach them. Like, those are the 3 fundamental questions. That'll be more where the challenge is on the marketing side. The operations side, that's already taken care of. You can already provide the solution, right? Other times you have the opposite problem. You see the problem, everyone else sees the problem, they know they need it, they're willing to pay for it, right? It's just that you don't have the solution, you have to develop something, right? So it's a slightly different thing. M. Marriott says, buy a snowblower now in the summer and make money in the winter, or fly down to the southern hemisphere now with it. Ride that snowblower to freedom. What you got to do is you got to drive it down. If you're where I am in Canada, you need to drive that snowmobile down. You ever driven a snowblower? You could, if you're one of those people, maybe you travel by wheelbarrow. I don't know, but it's a good idea. And then you go to where people have a need for that. Actually, you'd probably do the opposite. You'd probably be coming up north, right? If you're going to clear snow for a living. It's like that thriving snowmobile manufacturing industry that they have down in Honduras or something. But yeah, you got the right idea, Marriott. Marriott says, I don't know if there's a snowblower rental in winter. I would imagine so. Yeah, I think they do. But I mean, the point is, if you can get to the snowmobile rental place, you probably don't need a snowmobile. You know what I'm saying? Like, or a snowblower. You know what I'm saying? The fact that you could even get there suggests that you don't need it. So I don't know if that's really much of a thing. A lot of people just own them. They just own just like you'd own your own lawnmower, they own their own snowblower, And the little kids that offer grass cutting services in the summer, they also offer snow clearing services in the winter. It's like a year-round thing. You go to them. They will take care of your outside kind of thing. That idea. Guido is back. Hello, Guido. Says, do you think free products, specifically software, are a good funnel to build trust with the user and later offer a pro version or additional services? Or should you try to charge money right away? Well, there's a couple of different models there, and it depends on your customers, right? So that question is obviously a marketing type question. It's not about developing the product. It's about how you sell the product and how you make money with it. So in order to know what the answer is to those questions for you who have a specific situation with specific potential customers, right? You would need to touch base with that market. You would need to go out and find who these people are, get to know them, right? See, the thing is, we're talking here about how successful entrepreneurs think differently, how entrepreneurs think. Let me give you the secret of how that's done, okay? A lot of people look at this type of thing, business and entrepreneurship, and they think it's a journey to make money. Okay, it really isn't. You're missing the point. What it is, it's a journey to understand your potential customers, your market, right? Just so everybody knows the lingo, a market means a collection of customers, right? An industry means a collection of suppliers, producers, right? A market means a collection of customers or potential customers. Your journey when you go into entrepreneurship or in business, really, understanding, how the business makes money. It's a journey to understand your market. Imagine if you knew right now all the people out there that you could reach and you could deal with that had a specific need for, say, this software that Guido was talking about, right? You knew who those people are, you knew where they were, you knew everything about them, like how much they consider reasonable to pay for it. You know exactly what features they're looking for and the weighting of the different features. What's the priority? You know how much they want those, how much money they would be willing to pay for them, right? How urgent these needs are, right? You knew what it would take to delight them. You knew what they don't appreciate, right? And you were able to communicate in a way that would like make them buy because you understand exactly what their language is. You can speak their language. Imagine if you knew all of that, right? Well, this would be easy. You'd be like a multi-billionaire. You know what I mean? This wouldn't be much of a challenge. You know exactly what to do. You know exactly who to sell it to, and you know exactly how to sell it to them. That makes them line up around the corner saying, please take my money. I want more of this. I want everything you've got, right? This wouldn't really be a challenge. You're really on a journey to obtain this knowledge. That's what you're on. You're going to understand your customers. If you had perfect understanding of your customers, this wouldn't be a challenge. It's because we have an imperfect understanding of our customers that makes this a challenge. We don't know who would want this. We don't really fully understand how much they'd be prepared to pay and what they really care about and what's most important to them. We don't really understand that. We might have a fuzzy idea, but it's far from perfect. And then we don't have a perfect understanding of like what to say to these people that would convince them that, we are the solution to their problem, right? Do I show them a picture? Do I show them a video? Do I explain things to them? Do I have to give them a demonstration? Do they have to take a test drive of it to be convinced? That's the stuff that you need. That's the journey you're on, to learn all of that. And the person that understands that the best or the most, they're the ones that tend to clean up. So how do you do that? Well, you get to know your audience. You spend time with them. You interact with them. You understand, how they think, usually by having conversations with them, understanding what their situation is. If you have this attitude like, okay, I'm an introvert, I'm just going to stay over here. I don't want to deal with people, talk to people. They seem to buy what I sell, but, I don't really care about knowing more. That tends to not be super successful, generally. Let's see here. Where did we leave off? So that was Guido. Guido says, I guess the risk is that a user subtly values a free product lower than something they have to pay for. Exactly. There's an example of like a question you would like to use. I offer value, but I'm afraid that the perception will be if I offer it for free, people will perceive it as not having a lot of value. In contrast, if I were to charge people $450 for it, then people would regard it. It would be perceived as some kind of premium solution simply because it's so expensive, right? So what should I do? Should I offer it for $1 and potentially make more sales? Or should I offer it for $450 and only make 2 or 3 sales? Which one is the way forward, right? Hello to VV. Alpine's Pal says, one concern I have when learning a skill, or for example, going to college or self-learning, essentially spending years on one thing that can be hard to branch that out, if that makes sense. Yes, that absolutely does make sense. That's why you should go in as informed as possible, right? One of the things that I talk about on my channel regularly is, for example, if you are trying to ascertain the value of a very specific educational qualification, right? Because the school is trying to sell it. They're saying you should come and study here, pay your tuition and take this program that we're offering, that we're selling you, right? Because, once you get this, the doors will open for you and there'll be all kinds of opportunities. You're kind of a bit skeptical. You rightly regard that as okay, you're trying to sell me your product. There's an incentive there to say anything to get me to buy. I want to validate this thing, to see if it's worthwhile for me. So the way you can do that is go to LinkedIn, do a people search, type in the name of the educational qualification, confine the search to your geographic area, like your city or something, and then see who's got that degree or that qualification And where are they? If they're all serving coffee and pumping gas, that tells you one thing. If they're all like C-level executives of large corporations, that tells you something else. You know what I mean? Or maybe nobody has it. No results come up because this is a brand new thing, and you know what I mean? So knowing this would help inform your choice to say, like, look, I could go ahead and take this, but here's how much it's valued or regarded. And then you also look into, like, okay, you know, does it offer transportable skills? So I could work in other areas too with this. And if it does, is it perceived as offering transportable skills, right? Go and talk to the people that have this qualification. Say, has this helped you? How did you find it? Is this something that people recognize, or really not so much? You know, does it enable you to work in things similar to what you studied, but not directly what you studied? You know, so you can go out and you can do those kinds of queries, and you can get this information and then make a much more informed decision on what you're going to do, right? But don't just jump blind, because that's like a real gamble. You know what I mean? It's very risky. It's good to sort of be informed. Alpine's Pal says, can you explain what a lead is, please? Okay, well, a lead is a technical term. It's in sales, right? And the idea is that it's a potential customer, essentially. So this person could end up being a customer. We don't know yet. Maybe it's someone that knows of you and they've expressed an interest, but they haven't bought anything yet. And you know, maybe if you follow up with them, they might buy something. But as of right now, they haven't. So it's a prospect, somebody who could buy, but hasn't yet. So that's what a lead is. You have a lead. That means you have like someone that it's something that could lead to a sale, right? That's what that is. So for example, let's say you're the kid knocking on doors saying, you know, can we mow your grass? It'll be $5. Is, you know, would you like to buy that service? You know, and then maybe of 100 houses, you knock on the door, 50 people aren't home, but 50 people answer the door. Of those, 20 say, hey, you know, I might take you up on that, but they haven't actually bought anything yet. So what you could do is you could go back to them, pursue that lead, and say, you know, hey, we offer a special deal. If you buy in the next 6 hours, you get like 30% off, or, you know, whatever, right? So you're following up on that lead to see if you can turn it into a sale, right? Marriott says, I was speaking of something similar to a kid renting or borrowing a lawnmower to cut lawns. Yeah, I know. I was just joking earlier. But it makes sense. Hawkins and Co. Leather and Whip Company says, question, what is the senior manager looking for in the last interview if you've passed through the first two? Let them lead the... Okay, you're talking about job interviews? We're not really talking about job interviews here. This is a live stream on side hustles and entrepreneurship. To answer your question very briefly, they're looking for attitude and whether you have the right mentality. That's usually the thing that they're looking for. They don't care about the details. They care about, you know, your general attitude and ambition. Also, welcome to my side hustle, leather. Okay, well, that can mean several things there. Hawkins and Co. Leather and Whip Company. That, you know, it depends how you do it. I was watching a thing the other day on ColecoVision. Anybody know what that is? It was a video game system that came out in like 1980 or somewhere in there. And Coleco was like, was it Connecticut Leather Company? They put out a video game console. A leather company. They sold like leather. So I don't know what that means. Like belts, hats, boots. And then their own video game console. They're the ones that invented, like, is it like Donkey Kong or whatever it was? You know, anyway, I'm dating myself, but it was a leather company. So never underestimate people that are really, really into leather. Words to live by. I should put that on the shirt. Never underestimate people into leather. my friend. And then on the back it says, enough said. Alpine's Pal says, my dad told me a story of how he had an excessive amount of fish and some other seafood from a friend, and he went into a market thinking there's no chance to sell anything, and he sold out in 2 hours. That's really good. Which explains that in the middle of the entire market, you still get customers because there's a lot of people in this world. Yeah, exactly. You know, this is why you don't operate on assumptions. You go out and you interact with the world and you see how it goes on. There's a lot of odd and surprising things going on out there. You think like, oh no, this idea has no potential. And then turns out people a lot dumber than you are succeeding in a big way by doing that exact thing. You know, what's the difference? It's that they see it happen right in front of their face. So they go, oh, maybe I could do this, right? You don't see it in front of you, so you maybe assume that it doesn't happen. You know what I'm saying? So this is the thing. This is why a big part of entrepreneurship is going out and observing stuff. You know, you go out of your way to like just see what's going on, you know, to keep your ear to the ground of, you know, whatever stuff you're tuned into. We've got to the end of the chat, so keep the awesome questions and comments coming. We got some great questions. We got some great insights here and contributions from people. Thank you for participating. You guys are all awesome, right? And you can take that to the bank. You know, I'm basically just responding to whatever you guys are saying, you know, which is actually a lot funner than me monologuing on something, you know, prepared or something like that. You know, I do these live streams and sometimes I actually, you know, I'm not behind the 8 ball that day. I'm actually, you know, doing everything in a controlled kind of way. I'm not late for anything. And so I can do a bit of preparation and, you know, think about what I'm going to talk about before I go live and maybe write down a couple notes. Other days, you know, one thing leads to another, things come up and I don't really have a lot of time to do preparation. And that's today. So I appreciate it when I get people saying stuff that I can react to rather than I have to rely on just creating like essentially an hour and a half long lecture on the spot. So keep the questions and comments coming. While we're waiting for the next question, just as a reminder, if you want to learn more about business, check out my course called the $100 MBA. For those that don't know, an MBA is a Master's of Business Administration. It is the gold standard when it comes to knowing business, right? If you have an MBA, then you know business. What is business? It's the scientific study of how to make money. That's what it is, right? So things like entrepreneurship, it's one area of business. Marketing is another area of business, right? These are all things you study in a business program, right? And what I've done is I've created a course. It's actually, like it is a course, but it's a more accurate description of it would be a program because within it, there are the equivalent of several courses. And what I'm doing is I'm giving you the same material that you would learn from a university in an MBA program. You have access to all of it, okay? But there's no tests, no evaluations, no exams, no projects, nothing you have to turn in to be evaluated. It's you have access to the knowledge, and but you don't have the, you know, the school experience where you have to go to class and do evaluations. So this is a solution for some people. Some people don't want to have to go back to school and pay a lot of money to do this, but they want the knowledge. The knowledge can help you do this stuff, entrepreneurship, and work for yourself. It can also help you be more successful in your conventional career if that's what you're doing, right? You understand what's important to your employer. You understand how your employer thinks and how they work. And that really helps you deliver the right things to them and they see you as valuable. So it's useful for a variety of reasons. So some people that find that useful are entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs. This gives you the knowledge. You want to learn marketing, you want to learn entrepreneurship, just like you can do it in an MBA program at a university, you can do it in this course. It's entirely self-study. You get the textbooks on these things, the same textbooks they use in places like Harvard Business School in their MBA program. And I provide videos that guide you through the material. So the learning comes from reading the actual textbooks that I didn't write. These are written by some of the top people in the world in their respective fields, right? So that's what you're learning. You can get the books very cheaply from Amazon. They sell them all on Amazon. You could buy the latest edition for like a lot of money, or you could buy a slightly older version of it, like 5-10 years old, for substantially less. Like we're talking, like when I created the course, they were selling some of these for like $5. You know what I mean? So there's some options there for you depending on what you're interested in, but that's what this course is. So if that's what appeals to you, you want to learn this stuff, check that out. You can skim the entire material, and just get an overview, get an idea of what everything does, or you could go really, really in depth and get the same level of knowledge coming out as you would in a brick and mortar university. That's going to take a lot more time, but it's all there for you if you want to do that. So that's that course. Check it out. Link in the description. And I've also created a video describing the course in detail, answering questions about it, so it's as transparent as possible. Okay, we got some more activity in the chat here. Thank you. Let's resume with this stuff here. Where do we leave off? Okay, yeah, we were talking about leather, right? It was a deep philosophical conversation that really covered some philosophical ground. We talked about the fish market thing. Okay, Alpine's Pal says, this might not be the entire concept of entrepreneurship, but it's kind of the opposite of being the customer who is looking for the best deal or the best quality, etc. There may be other reasons. That's why, look, people are usually tuned in intuitively to being a customer. So for example, that if you want to buy something, there are places you go. You can physically go to stores, in your geographic region, right? Maybe there's a mall or something, where they have a lot of stores. Maybe there's a market, like kind of on the street. You want to buy vegetables or whatever. You don't go on the internet. You go, out in the real world, locally, and you see the vegetables. You can touch them, you can buy them, and then you take them home, right? You know what I mean? So that, like, if you're looking for that, that's where you go, right? Little kids that are doing a lemonade stand on the corner of the street, they don't understand this. That's still beyond them, right? But the analog is that if you want to be a supplier, a producer, and you want to sell your wares, right? Same thing applies. You don't just set up like a booth on a street corner and say, hey, anybody want to buy a lawnmower? Or, anybody want to buy vegetables? Usually the way you do it successfully is you go to a place where all the customers are congregating, right? Maybe a market. You want to sell vegetables? You go to the farmer's market or whatever, everybody's there selling vegetables of all kinds. You just, and the advantage of that is that that's where the customers are congregating who want to buy vegetables, right? So these are all based on concepts in marketing, right? It's like where you place your product. You place them where people are looking. Right? So if you're confused about I want to sell software or I want to sell whatever thing, one of the first questions is where do you go for that? Are there certain places online that all the customers that are looking for this type of software go? Where are they looking? Well, that's where I need to be, right? It might be inconvenient. It might, require money or effort or whatever. There might be roadblocks, you have hurdles you have to overcome. But it's usually better to do that than to just say, I don't want to spend the money, I don't want to jump through the hoops to be there. I want to sell it over here. I'm going to set up my own website, try to drive traffic to it. It's a lot harder of a proposal, right? Going against the grain like that. It's usually a lot easier to just go with the flow of an established industry, right? So it's not necessarily an entrepreneurial concept, it's a marketing concept. But yes, you're right. Guido, a specific idea I had in mind was a fitness tracking app. I know, quite generic. but execute it with great user experience. But since the base idea is quite general, I need a way to convince users. So Guido, there are certain solutions out there where there's a ton of solutions. Like, you've got a lot of choices there. The problem is they're all crap. That's the problem. I remember, this is really dating myself, I remember a day when I wanted like the equivalent of an MP3 player. I wanted to put it in a car I had back then. I don't want to play CDs or, whatever. I want to play digital music in my car. And I looked at like all the solutions, like there were hundreds and hundreds of options for this, like portable MP3 player. But they were all garbage, they were all cheap. And they seemed to prioritize price over quality. And I was the opposite. It's like, I don't mind paying as long as it works and it's good. I don't want it to sound like crap. And I don't want it to like break on me because it's flimsy. And then Apple came out with the iPod. And it was like, there you go. And it blew all these other options right out of the water because it actually worked. It was expensive as hell, but it worked. It was like, I don't know, at least 5 times the price of all the other options. But you know what? This thing won out because the customers felt that they were getting like the value to price ratio was higher with the iPod than with all these other crappy solutions. All these other companies got there first and did a terrible job. And then Apple came late to the game and just dominated it, right? Google did the same thing. There are all kinds of search engines. I remember back in the day was using like Alta Vista, Ask Jeeves, World Wide Web Worm, Excite. Like all these other things that they're long dead. Yahoo. I mean, Yahoo's technically still around, but you know what I mean? So Google came late to the game in search engines. And I know they were criticized at the time, people saying like, well, you're too late. There are already a ton of search engines and they've got a head start over you. It's like, yeah, true. But we've got something of superior quality and that blows everything away. And Google, as I recall, they didn't like advertise, like they didn't shove their products like in your face the way that Yahoo and other people were doing. They just relied on word of mouth. And, because they had something of such superior quality, word of mouth spread pretty quickly. This thing actually works. It actually finds exactly what you're looking for, like first time, So remember, like that is also a thing. Just because other people get there first, and there's, a lot of people playing in that industry or in that sort of space, doesn't mean that you can't come in and still succeed, right? If you have something that's clearly superior, and that's my impression. I know a lot of people use health apps. God knows I do. And you know what I'm saying? But there are a lot of people are using them, but I don't think a lot of people really love them. They're not like really solving their problems perfectly. I haven't heard a lot of like people raving about how awesome they are and like, one product dominating that field. I haven't. Maybe that is the case. I just haven't heard about it. So maybe there's potential there, right? So if you really come up with something really good that's like, not just you think it's good, but you actually put it in front of people and they all conclude this is far superior, then that's probably something that will win in that business. And the world always needs a better thing, We're drowning in mediocre solutions. There's a lot of solutions out there that, they're all right, I guess, but they're far from perfect, right? So there's always tons of opportunity to come in and improve something, and you can really clean up. Alpine's Pal says, the customer is wanting to buy something, but still, Lambos sell luxury and fun, not cars. Okay. Like you mean like Lamborghinis, and stuff like that? Yeah, well, when you're wanting to buy a car that's the same price as a house, yeah, there's obviously going to be a point of difference there between a Toyota and a Lamborghini. Toyota also, as I understand it, they're loved by their customers, and they've got the reputation for being extremely high quality for what you get, for that price point, right? So you're competing with something with exceptional quality, and it's loved by people. Now you're selling a product that's competing with them that's 10 times the price. So you're going to have to be damn good at explaining what the difference is, the point of difference is for people that would convince them to buy a Lamborghini than a Toyota, right? Obviously, it's not just to get you from A to B, right? Northern Nomad says, the company's expert, I decided to stop applying for strict remote jobs where hundreds of other people are applying because they are so saturated. What do you, 2 cents about those jobs? We're not talking about jobs. This is a live stream about side hustles and entrepreneurship. I will be doing a live stream in an hour covering that stuff. So we could hold your question till then, if you please. VV says, if we can be anonymous while doing a business like self-publishing under several pen names, would it be wise to protect one's identity? English is my third language. Sorry. First of all, you're doing perfectly fine in communicating in English, VV. So don't be self-conscious about that. Secondly, it's a double-edged sword. It does make sense sometimes to protect your identity, for issues of identity theft and fraud and, all this kind of stuff, and being less of an attack target if people are out to do you harm, right? But it's a double-edged sword. Do you want to buy something for someone who won't admit to you who they are, right? Like that kind of doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, right? Like, why are you so afraid to even disclose who you are or where you are? That doesn't fill me with confidence that, you're delivering something legitimate to me, right? So it's like a pendulum swinging one way then the other. There's usually a happy medium, right? You should be able to disclose your name and, who, so it's all above board. You have nothing to hide. You're offering something legitimate, right? But you do take certain steps to do your due diligence and protect yourself from identity theft and fraud and irate customers, like just crazy people. You know what I mean? So, but that's kind of a balancing act, right? So, as you can tell, most businesses and a lot of individuals, they opt to just, here's my name, here's what I'm doing, right? But in certain, as I'm sure you know, in certain areas, because of the sensitive nature of whatever that area is, a lot of people choose to operate incognito, right? They'll kind of have a bit of a mask on, and that's purportedly to protect them. So you get all kinds. Like, go out and see what other people are doing, and especially in the circles in which you're inhabiting, what people are doing, and that'll give you an idea of okay, what's kind of normal for this type of thing, and that should frame maybe what approach you take. Alpine's Palace says, sure, there will be competition, but you only need X amount of revenue to be satisfied until you get greedy, which is a good indicator you've made it far, and more importantly, you've made the world a better place, or made people happy, served them, not just made money, although that's nice too. Understanding what people are interested in, shopping at a mall, buying tools, maybe it's like thrifting. Lumber, now that I think about it, everything you see around you is made of money. Yes, exactly. Like, everything has value. Money represents value, and most things you see around you represent some form of value, right? Alpine's Pal says, there's a lot here. I've heard that money doesn't make people happy. Good relationships with people does. Yeah, just ask all the people who've had failed marriages, how happy they are. So if you have good relationships, you can work with that. The money will come itself, kind of like a sample of blood or a drive through a small stream of customers, basically. But that reminds me, there is a good reason why big business go bankrupt, take Big Lots or Sports Authority. I've never heard of those places. Look, Alpine's Pal, you're young. You've obviously you're getting a lot of information from the world. You're hearing sayings, you're hearing little quotes and things like this, and you're internalizing them. That's good in the sense that you're tuned in to some of this stuff. But what I'd highly recommend for you, I'd recommend two things, at least things to consider, okay? This would be my advice to you in a general sense, okay? If you want to understand something, whatever it is, okay, learn it formally. Like don't listen to rumors and hearsay and things people are like just kind of saying on like social networking or something. Go and learn that thing properly, right? Go straight to the source for that information. So if you want to learn business, for example, don't just pick up on little quotes and buzzwords that you're hearing in like the media or something you hear companies say or you hear in movies or, you know what I mean? Like go and study it, learn about it. Okay, you don't have to study it from me. I'm not trying to peddle courses or whatever, but just in general, go and learn it from like a proper source, right? The people that teach business at universities, that write books on it, like people that are authorities, in the peer-reviewed study of this, that's a good place to start. It's usually the right approach. Not, I'm not going to say it's the be-all, end-all, but it is usually a great starting point, okay? You know what I mean? This stuff isn't kind of hocus pocus. It isn't kind of this weird alchemy that you hear about. It's an actual scientific thing. And there are principles upon other principles upon other principles. And it's all very scientific. And it's all backed up with evidence and data and all this kind of stuff. People have, like that's how they study things formally, right? So, you know what I mean? So if you're interested in that, go learn it formally. Now, I don't mean you have to go to school and do all these things that are like impossible for people to do. But I mean, even if you bought like a book on it, like a textbook, a lot of business ideas are really not that hard. If you have like high school, like you can read and write, you can do basic high school mathematics. This stuff is kind of child's play. It's really not that hard. I've done engineering. Engineering is hard. It's like a whole other thing. But business is really not that much of a stretch. You're just learning a series of basic ideas that all stack on top of each other, right? So that's the first thing I'd recommend for you, okay? Like if you're interested in learning, don't listen to any more like little sayings and things in pop culture and in movies. Like learn it properly, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's also a lot of self-serving people out there that would love to influence your thought, to have you think something and behave a certain way that's convenient for them, right? So don't be fooled by that stuff. Get your knowledge right from the source. Then it makes it hard for people to pull the wool over your eyes, okay? Secondly, instead of like sitting back and like learning by hearing what people say, start trying things, okay? You seem to be interested in business. You're here. We've had several interactions, which is good. And I applaud you for taking an interest in stuff like this at what seems like a rather young age. The great thing is, instead of just listening to advice, is like trying little things that are easy to do. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to take big risks, but it's things you can do. And when you've done something, nobody could tell you you're wrong or that it's impossible. That's the beauty of it, right? So the more experiences you have, the more accomplishments you have, because you've actually put stuff out there, you've tried things. That gives you more knowledge, more power. It gives you learning that like nobody can take away from you. And you get confidence and you get certainty because you know what you're talking about. You've done it. So therefore you can talk all about it. And as I said, nobody could tell you you're wrong or that it's impossible. I'm going to adjust my cameras here so it's not quite so dark. Here we go. I'll probably have to adjust them back in a little bit. Okay, so I would consider those two things. I think the way forward for you will be primarily in doing those two things. Just my opinion. Like you mentioned, big businesses going bankrupt. Well, rumors fly when a business goes bankrupt. All of a sudden, everybody's got an opinion on why and what happened. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's complete BS. Or maybe it's worse than that. Maybe it's self-serving kind of purposeful misinformation. I want you to think this. So I'm going to say, oh, I know it's because of this. And then you believe me, and I have a vested interest in having you think like that, So don't be taken in by that stuff. Learn the stuff for real, and then what's going on. Guido says, great points. Not the typical startup mentality, which often seems to be oversell and deliver mediocre quality. Yeah, that is the exact opposite of what they found works in the real world, right? There was a study done. I'll spare you all the details, but needless to say, there was a study done. It started in the 60s. It was originally started by General Electric, and then it became a private thing that was, it moved around for a bit in the 70s, and then it ended up being Boston Consulting Group, BCG in the States, which is like the second largest management consulting firm in the US behind McKinsey. And, the entire crux of this study was, let's look at businesses out in the real world, okay? We've got the financial information from them. They file taxes. They release financial statements to their investors. This stuff is all out in the open, right? We have access to it. So let's see if we can find any kind of correlation between a business strategy and the financial results. Like, it's not about theories, like how we think things work. That's not what we're doing here. We're just looking at data. We're seeing this company tried this, and this was the financial result. This other company tried this, and this was the financial result, right? So it was basically, that's what they were looking at. And they did this study. It went on for decades, looking at all types of companies, big, small, ones that were diversified. They did like many, many different things, like Yamaha, right? Those like conglomerates from the 70s, where they did everything. They sold everything from motorbikes to drum sets to condoms to, industrial fertilizer, diversified companies to pure play companies that only did one thing. Big, small, medium, in every country. What was their strategy? And what was the result? Right? Like that's what this study was. And you filtered and refined and crunched all these numbers, and you looked for patterns, and they concluded several things that came out of that. And the number one thing that they concluded was that financial success across the board depended on how much focus you put on quality. And they had a very specific definition of quality. It wasn't like conforming to a standard, which is how most people use the term quality in context of business these days. ISO 9000 quality, or quality assurance, that kind of thing. No, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about quality as perceived by customers. Which do you think is the best solution, right? So they found that the companies that cared about that and really pushed for that, regardless of things like price, regardless of things like other factors like convenience or, whatever, they tended to clean up through a variety of mechanisms. Either you could sell more of your product and make more money that way, or you don't sell more, but you command a higher price. Somebody mentioned Lamborghini. They're selling a car for 10 times the price of other cars. You might think that's a failing strategy, but no, they put quality first, because the people who buy Ferraris obviously feel that this car is worth more than 10 times what that other, like a Toyota or something, is worth, right? So that explains it. If you can deliver quality as determined by your customers and communicate that, and they believe that's what they're getting and their opinions don't change, you clean up. And when you look at the profit margin of something like Ferrari, it's higher than Toyota. They're making more money selling less cars, like per car, or for the size they are, for the investment. So that's the first thing they concluded. Quality wins. And that is also kind of intuitive to us, You don't mind paying for something a little more expensive if you feel you're getting something like that really kicks ass. Whereas the other solution, you don't really feel that great about. Yeah, it's all right. A lot of companies have made their money by producing a better version of something that already existed. In Canada, we have Tim Hortons. It's kind of the big Canadian thing. I think it sucks. They sell mud with like sugar in it and pass it off as coffee. But then you get a company like Starbucks says, I've got this brilliant business idea. I'm going to sell something that everybody already has and knows, coffee, but I'm going to do it for like 10 times the price. That's my winning business idea. And everybody thought they were crazy, right? But then when you see that, like, wow, you go into a Starbucks, at least the way it used to be, you go into a Starbucks and like the quality is fantastic. First of all, the person actually smiles at you. They actually seem happy to see you or whatever, instead of like what you get at, say, a typical Tim Hortons where you feel like you're ruining their day by you showing up and giving them work to do, right? And then the coffee's superior and all this kind of stuff. So it's like quality is the number one factor that leads to profitability. That's what they found. And this has been the centerpiece of Boston Consulting Group's advice to businesses ever since the 1980s. And despite this, when we look out into the world, we see a lot of people trying to do the opposite, but yet they never seem to get ahead, There are some exceptions, things like Walmart and stuff, but they need huge economies of scale to make that work, Not really usually an option for a startup or an individual, you know what I mean? Let's see here. Where did we Sorry, I keep going off on tangents and then the chat falls behind. I'm going to see if I can clean these up. Okay, lumber, we did that one. Okay, Alpine's Pal, I've heard that money doesn't make good people happy. Sample of blood or drive through a small stream of customers, basically. That reminds me, is there a good reason why businesses go bankrupt? Yeah, we covered all that. Someone says, do you like cheese? Yeah, why not? Especially, what do they say? It's the smell of God's feet. Vivi says, I'll do it. Thank you very much for your take on it. You're absolutely welcome, Vivi, and best of luck to you. Alpine's Pal, speaking of anonymity, there are a lot of scam businesses. Some are so stupid that they put a random house as their business address. I wonder how they do it and how one can take that and make it legit. I don't know if you're on the right track there. Thumbs up to VV. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just trying to learn the concepts conceptually, and some of the things make sense, but you are right. I should verify it instead of just thinking too much about it. Yeah, I mean, you should learn it. Like if you're thinking of doing a business or anything like that, take the trouble to learn it properly. Like it'll save you from making tremendous, costly mistakes, and it will accelerate how quickly it'll be until you see success. Instead of waiting 8 years for something to work out, you might be able to only have to wait 3 years or, something like that, right? If you learn it properly. So it's well worth it. And what I found, because that's what I did, I sort of had a career in business and then I went and got an MBA towards the end of it. Oh, I'm about to sneeze. Okay, it's past. You might not feel like it, but it is the right thing to do. You will come out on top if you do that. Like learn your craft, you know what I'm saying? So, but then try things. Don't just listen to advice. It's not about listening to people. Try something, verify it, put something out there, Like, okay, in business, you have a lot of tough decisions. They're tough because they're contradictory. We already talked about the price thing with regard to software. Somebody was saying, they want to sell like software, but if you offer it for free, then there's a perception that it's cheap and not very good. If you sell it for a large sticker price, it can get the perception that it's like very, very good quality, right? So this is a contradiction. you know? Now, look, let's take a mundane example. Let's say you want to sell something online. You got some item in your home that you don't need anymore, but it's of value, right? Maybe you took up like playing guitar, electric guitar or something, and you then abandon it. You got this guitar that, you could sell. It cost you hundreds of dollars. You want to sell it. Now, you go online, you can, set the price for it, right? And offer it on a site that sells things like eBay or Reverb or whatever. And, you could put the price low and then it will sell very quickly, right? Or you could put the price higher and, you'd have to wait for a few weeks or months or whatever for it to sell, right? What should you do? It's kind of a trade-off, right? Little money now or possibly a lot more money later, what makes the most sense, right? A lot of business decisions are like that. They kind of go like this. It's not like the clear win and then the fail. It's like, no, this could work, or this, we could do the opposite, and that could work too. We don't really know, right? So when you study business, when you learn how business concepts work, all of a sudden you get clarity on a lot of those. What should you do? You should do this. That is the thing that will pay off. All things being equal, that pays off the vast majority of the time. So a lot of people just jump to that, right? I mean, we talked about quality, like the idea is like, well, why don't a lot more people follow the quality thing? Well, doing something better costs more money. They don't want to spend money, therefore they don't do it. They try and do it as cheaply as possible. Seems like a good plan, right? Unfortunately, it's hard to sell something that's a piece of crap, especially when, people wise up to it. Once somebody's bought your thing once and seen how it truly disappoints, they're not going to come back. Now look at the opposite situation. You're selling something of very high quality. One effect of that, apart from the fact that people will pay more for it, is that you tend to get a lot more return customers. Somebody's bought it once. They go, wow, this was awesome. They come back and they want to buy it again. So you have to put less effort into selling it. You just put it out there and you have a lot of people that just, you put it on the shelves and the shelves clear, because it's recognized. Right? So it may cost you more initially, but what you find is that the cost of the quality, it pays for itself many times over. The other thing is that there's other less intuitive concepts where you don't even have to pay as much upfront for the quality. So, I mean, they found some very interesting things about quality that came out of that study. That study was called PIMS originally. Where do we leave off here? I'm trying to learn conceptually on my own. I was in Canada recently. Uber and Lyft are American businesses, support local Canadian business. Quite a shame. Yeah, I steer clear of any political type crap. We're above that here, so don't make it political. I don't have a lot of time for that in my space here. It was a sticker on a car. So politics and taxes have a play in it, but that's a different conversation. Yes, it is a different conversation. Maybe it's because most startups, this is Guido, maybe it's because most startups are already looking for an exit as soon as their product launches. Some are. That is one thing that's done, but it's not the majority of them. Like if you consider a startup to be not only innovative type companies, but also like SMEs, like small business. Like somebody starts up a roofing company or a drywall company. Those are more traditional type businesses. Often they're not started with the intention that you're going to sell them immediately, right? Those businesses don't really lend themselves to being sold quite as easily. So you're right. There are certain types that do that, but the vast majority of businesses don't take that approach, right? I used to do recently, I did a live stream series on private equity on Fridays. And I'm just putting that on hold for a while, and I'm talking more about business in general. I've got a really exciting episode this coming Friday. We're talking about a very specific type of corporate fraud that's been done throughout history. Hitler did it, Enron did it. It's been very widespread using special purpose entities and off-balance sheet entities. And there's some interesting ideas there where it makes that type of fraud almost undetectable in this day and age, So I think that's a fascinating idea. Don't usually talk about that kind of thing, but I just thought that was a really interesting idea. Combining a few management concepts there to make something that is kind of scary, actually. So we're covering that this Friday. But I used to talk about private equity a lot, and private equity is like the buying and selling of businesses. Usually not startups, but slightly larger businesses, right? But still small, medium-sized businesses. It's an interesting area, kind of a fascinating area for me. So if you guys have any interest in that, that's what we're talking about on Friday. And it does enter the discussion. I've mentored a few startups that was their strategy going in. They said okay, we're going to start this thing up, we're going to get it off the ground, then we're going to sell it. And it's okay, but the problem was that where I've seen that strategy, usually it's an excuse for the founders to not have to worry about sales and marketing, which is false. You still have to worry about sales and marketing. They think that they can eliminate having to deal with sales and marketing because they're just going to sell their business as an entity at the end. It's the problem is that you have a hard time convincing people it's of value, if you've never sold anything. You know what I mean? And you don't even, there's no evidence that suggests that this is a thing that people want, right? Oh yeah, you could say, well, I believe in this. Yeah, I know, but maybe, show me the money. Show me that there's evidence that people want this, because everybody thinks their own creation is fantastic, right? Does anyone else share that view? No? Okay, you have no evidence. You have nobody that's seen this, that has bought it and is delighted with it. You don't have that. Then how do I know I'm paying for something that's not just smoke and mirrors? It's not just going to be this thing that I have to just write off. You know what I mean? So there's specific concerns to taking that approach, right? Usually you have to run it the same way you would run any other business. Here are my customers. Here's a history of profitability and sales, showing that there's demand. There's an established customer base. Here are the types of customers that are into this. Now, if you could take this and take it to the next level, you could build on it. But you've obviously got something here, The only question becomes, do you think you can take it to the next level? There's no question that this is valuable in itself. So anyway, that's some specific concerns about that strategy. I got to go for now. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day. So that's Alpine's Pal. So thanks, Alpine's Pal. You certainly were participating wholeheartedly in this. And I hope that you will continue your journey to doing this. And you never know, maybe you'll be working for yourself. Maybe, the idea that there's no ceiling to, the money you can make when you're in business for yourself and the things you can accomplish, maybe you'll really be living that out. So I wish you every bit of luck. Okay, we are past the hour and a half mark here, so I'm going to be winding this down. If there are any last minute questions, ask them now or forever hold your peace. I will be back in just under half an hour, where we're doing an episode of Honest HR Nitrous. So that's where we talk about getting jobs in the real world and the gritty reality of job search in the real world. Not the theory about how it should work, but what actually transpires, fake jobs, ghosting, all that kind of stuff. That's what we talk about. So if that's what you're interested in, come back in about 25 minutes. Other than that, I will be back next week, same time, with another episode of Side Hustle Ideas, where we explore entrepreneurship. So I hope to see you then. Hopefully you're enjoying your Labor Day weekend. Get the hell out and go and do something fun, and you got to take care of yourself. You got to invest in your mental health if you're in job search or anything like that. So thanks to Guido, thanks to Alpine's Pal, VV, everyone that participated, my close personal friend, Leather and Whip Company, and everyone, Myron. Oh, I'm going to sneeze again. Okay, false alarm. Okay, thanks everyone. You guys are awesome. We'll see you soon. Take care.